what's up, and welcome to another episode of the Baseline Scoop. And returning to the show today, of course, is my partner in crime, Mr. Justin Crosby. Justin, how you doing, man? It's been a while. It's been a
I
long time.
know. I'm okay. I'm a little sleep deprived, but but I'm fine now.
Good, man. Yeah, it's been a lot going on with the Sixers
Yes.
since the last time that we met. Not all of it good, actually. Very little of it good, I'd say. But it's something else that could keep someone sleep deprived too. So it's been rough, man.
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna lie to you. So anyway, it's we're moving on to the off season. It's just like it is every year for Sixers fans. At least for the past 39 years, we take our lumps during the regular season, during the postseason, and you move on following year and hope it's better. So last episode actually was we had a little therapy session on the last episode. I was
We
joined
did.
by
We did.
Ty, and we actually had a local Sixers fan on, Justin. He came on and he just kind of talked about what it's like being a Sixers fan and having to
Hmm.
deal with all this, and so go back and listen to episode 36, everybody, and kind of join us for a little therapy session. But part of what we talked about is hope. That's the thing with Philadelphia fans. I feel like as dark as the off season always starts, based on how the regular season or the postseason ended.
Right.
There's always that hope that, well, if we just do this, that, and the other thing,
We'll
then
we'll
we're going to
we'll be
kill it.
good.
We'll be back, we'll
Yep.
solve it.
Yep.
So, of course, there's already that going on for the Philadelphia 76ers. But before we get kind of that stuff and some of the news surrounding it, Justin, we haven't had a chance to talk to you. What did you think about the way the season ended? What kind of stood out to you, and just where are you at, mentally, emotionally, spiritually with the Philadelphia 76ers?
I mean, it was a very rough ending. Going back to that Miami series, like game 5, all right, like you lost, in Miami, which I really thought that the momentum from game 4 could lead them to some type of at least a closer game, right? Not losing by like 40 points, right? So that was very disappointing. But just knowing like, although this year they haven't been the best home team, but in general, like that building, like if you haven't been to a game, like the electricity in that building, especially when the team
Yeah.
is doing well, it's amazing. It's like no other feeling. I don't think any other gym or any other
Hmm.
arena gives that feel. And I'm thinking they come back home to that, you should be able to pull out a victory, go to game 7, and then, you know, I might be able to take on the chin the basically 3 out of 4 years losing the game 7s, right? But they just came out and pooped the bed, and it was kind of ridiculous. And
Yeah.
you know, a lot is being said about how people played, and first Danny, that was terrible for Danny, right? That
Yeah.
injury, and I,
Yeah.
I and I kind of really felt that the Sixers would lose after Danny because Danny just brought
Hmm.
so much confidence, and Danny was really one of the the best 3-point shooters on the team. Like Niang just
Yeah.
disappeared in the series. Tyrese was up and down, although he's a good shooter numbers wise. He was up and down. Tobias was up and down.
Mm.
Harden wasn't really hitting.
Yeah, he was down. Yeah.
Yeah, down. So, but yeah, Danny, like that kind of took the air out the building. And it's
Yeah.
just really crazy that like 2 years in a row, Danny gets hurt in the second round, and then like all hell breaks loose. But whatever.
This
But
is what it is.
yeah, and it also goes to like I know there are a lot of people who hate Danny Green. Like I do
Hmm.
think that Danny should only do he should just shoot threes. I don't
Hmm.
think he should dribble ever. But Danny
Yeah.
brings this sort of calm, this veteran leadership, and he just brings
Hmm.
this like championship pedigree, and it's like thing of like not being scared, right? Like there
Yeah.
are a lot of guys who in that moment who have come up small in big moments, but Danny has
Mhm.
championships, and although you can say Danny's not a star player, but he has come up big in moments for championship teams. That's why he has rings. But
Yeah,
you know,
no, absolutely, I agree. And I think you talked about Danny's leadership, and I think that's what's uh, I would say probably his best quality.
mhm,
And it's he gets a lot of crap for not being able to do this, not being able to do that, his shots off for a streak or whatever. But
right,
um, he was one of the best Sixers perimeter defenders, and
yep,
maybe that's I mean, it's definitely not a shot on the front office, but it's just a weakness of the roster was perimeter
right,
defense. But
right,
even still, he was one of the better perimeter defenders. He was one of the
right.
better shooters on the team. But that leadership is the most important trait at all. And the thing for me where I really saw it is uh, he came back out to the court
Right,
like with the team.
right,
Like he tore his ACL and his LCL,
right.
and he walked right back out there on the court. I mean, he didn't play obviously, but just to be out there with your teammates, like he understood the gravity of the situation,
He
right?
did, and
And
that's
and
all
he
you. And
really just
I'm sorry.
oh, I was just gonna say, and he really did all that he could to kind of coach them along. And so,
Yep.
we kind of come to the question like, well, what do you do with Danny Green? Now that we're coming to the offseason, he's got the $10 million option. It's tough to see them paying him $10 million
Right.
to not play.
Right.
It's kind of like a catch-22 where it's like, well, do you want to be the guys to decline him this option so that way he can't use the facilities and the doctors of the Sixers to heal up and everything like that? Like it's an unscrupulous thing, it seems like, but at the same time, it's a business. But regardless, like I would still love it if Danny Green is somehow in some capacity in a responsible way still with the Philadelphia 76ers. And
I think
if
he
he
will be.
eventually moves on to coaching, which I think that he should because he's got a real leadership quality about him,
Right.
I would love to see him in Philadelphia in a coaching capacity.
I do think so. What I think will happen with Danny, I think they will decline Danny's option, and I think Danny knowing that, I mean, there are definitely some teams, unless there's a knockout trade that they could use Danny's salary for him to opt in and trade him to, and I'm
Yeah,
sure he would want to go to a contender, right? He's not
sure.
if he's going to want to come back and not have this be his last time on the court
Hmm.
from an injury, which he said he's going to come back. And he said he'll be ready at the All Star break. This is what
Okay.
he's saying. So on his podcast, he mentioned that he will be back by February.
Yeah,
So that's encouraging to hear. And
definitely.
ACL, surgery. Some people come back quicker. Some people come back,
Yeah.
later. But I think they'll end up, declining this option. I think they'll
Hmm.
sign Danny Green on like a vet minimum or something like that, where
Yeah.
instead of getting that 10, maybe Danny gets 3 because of his years of service, or 4, whatever
Sure.
the vet
Yeah.
minimum is for his years of
Yeah.
service.
I think it was
Or
like 2.6 for but
right, and
but
then
yeah, right
maybe
around that 3 exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and then you have Danny around the team, traveling
Mhm.
with the team,
Yeah.
being there for them, guiding the young guys, and then when he's ready to play, insert Danny when you need to. So I do think that he'll be back. I just think that he'll be back at a lower number.
Yeah, and the thing with it too is that obviously Danny's age is one of the first things people think of, when you're talking about recovering from an ACL and an LCL, but because it's just harder to recover.
Hmm.
We're not getting any younger, Justin. Like even for the lame stuff that we do, like it gets harder to recover.
Exactly.
So
But I do think the
coming
difference
back from
is
yeah,
I do think the difference is I think Danny really has the will, and he really doesn't want his career.
yeah,
Like a lot of people don't want their career to end on the note that
sure,
they don't want to end it on. I think Danny really is going to have that willpower to come back, and even if he doesn't play after next year
yeah,
for playing half the season or 20 games before the playoffs,
mhm,
whatever it is, I think Danny will do whatever in his power to get back. You know,
yeah.
so
No,
I have no
I
doubt
fully
about it.
agree, and I'll take it a step further. Like, the point that I'm thinking is like this isn't like I know John Wall tore his Achilles, but I'm just going to use him as an example. It's not a
Right,
John Wall situation where his entire game is based off of athleticism.
right,
Like Danny Green, like not a knock on him. Love Danny Green. Wasn't the most athletic person in the first place. So it's being kind. So
right.
he's a shooter. He's a spot up shooter. Now the defense is going to be even lesser than it was. Like that
Hmm.
more than likely.
Hmm.
Almost certainly. But even still, if he can get the shot back, which that's like the last thing you lose. Uh, yeah, we could still see Danny Green providing meaningful minutes on a team. So
Yeah, and
if
all
he
you
says
need
he's
at
good from February, I'll take his word for it. I believe him, and if we get him back on a vet min, I'm totally cool with it.
and then at that point, if Danny is brought back and he is recovery, have Danny on the third best offensive scorer on the other team. He should be able to be just fine. He can't play the one or two option anymore, like he was the seasons past for the Sixers. But put him on the third option, that's perimeter oriented, or a guy that really, like even like a guy like I'm just throwing it out. Say you're like playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, and there's a guy like Vanderbilt or McDaniels or somebody where you know just put him on a guy where you can kind of hide him sometimes, and he'll be perfectly fine. Zach, I think you're muted.
I was muted that entire time. Wow, look at that. Okay. So yeah, anyway, the whole point that I was getting at is that Danny Green, he gets a lot of crap
Mhm.
from everybody, and including myself. I'm not going to try and act like I was completely innocent, but the thing is,
Yeah.
like, it's not, no one ever wanted to see this. Like, this isn't
Mhm.
ever what we wanted to happen. What we wanted is Danny Green to thrive, and so
Right.
that's still the hope we have going forward. Hopefully he gets well soon.
Yep.
uh I wish him well in whatever's next. If that's in the NBA, absolutely. And based on what it sounds like he wants, that's the number one option. I really hope that for him. So,
Right.
we wish Danny Green nothing but the best. But when we talk about other leaders within the 76ers, one who kind of transitioning subjects who's been in the news as of late, obviously, is Doc Rivers. So when we're looking past the season, we're full into the off season now. Doc Rivers at the post-season press conference between with him and Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey right away, very
Mhm.
quick. Doc Rivers is our head coach. That's it. Doc Rivers is our head coach next year.
Right.
Uh, Knowing Daryl Morey, I think it's safe to say that it is not 100% certainty that Doc Rivers is the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers next year. And with that being said, there's a lot of smoke that kind of corroborates that feeling.
Yeah.
Most recently, yet again, a connection linking Doc Rivers to the LA Lakers. Okay,
Mhm.
most recently from Mark Stein. So, and it wasn't overly enthusiastic. It wasn't like, oh, the Lakers are doing everything within their power to get him. But basically, Mark Stein, he mentioned that the Lakers just haven't completely abandoned hope
Mhm.
on getting him. So, first and foremost, let me ask you, what do you think? What are your impressions of Doc Rivers after this season? And are you okay if he moves on from Philadelphia?
So I mean, I'm sure as any coach, I feel like he's made some bad decisions this season, but I was actually thoroughly impressed with his coaching during the Raptors series. I feel like previously we always talked about there's a couple things. Bad things for Doc, not playing the young guys, specifically giving Paul Reed a chance, but then deciding to play him in the playoffs when you really need him, where you could have played him all year. Not playing Isaiah Joe when Furkan Korkmaz is having the worst season of his life. You don't give Isaiah Joe a chance, right? Those are two like things that like you cannot forgive, right, from a coach. And I know like Doc is a veteran guy and all that, but like, and I'm sure Daryl Morey was in his ear, and other players were, other coaches were in his ear, and the players were probably trying to say like, "Hey, get
Yeah,
such and such into the game." But it's like, those were egregious. Like
yeah.
those were egregious. The
No,
good
I
things,
completely agree. Like,
yeah.
and you heard like earlier in the well, I guess later in the regular season, but a month ago or so, talking about DeAndre Jordan, he starts saying how the staff likes, DeAndre. Like it's not just Doc's decision. Like as a group, they made this decision, and so it's like, all right,
Turned
well,
out to be a bad one.
it turned out to be a bad one, and I still I don't know how true that was, because I can't imagine listen, it's one thing for Hall of Fame, top 15 of all coach, or top 15 all time head coach Doc Rivers, to say DeAndre Jordan was a better player than Paul Reed. You expect me to believe that Sam Cassell, that Dave Yeager, that they're all saying that that DeAndre Jordan still has anything left? Like Dan Burke must have been like rolling over on his assistant coach chair. Like,
hot take.
yeah,
Willie Cauley-Stein would have been
yeah,
way better on his roster than DeAndre
I
Jordan.
agree. I agree.
What are we doing?
I don't know what, people like. He got cut from the Lakers, he got cut from the Nets. Like, what did people expect at that point? Like, those are two teams that
He just
needed big
doesn't
man
have it
help
anymore.
desperately. Like, what were we expecting? Like Willie Cauley-Stein at least was like a mystery, and he had a little athleticism left. Like,
Exactly.
I'm not gonna say like he was great, like he wasn't gonna he wasn't gonna fill Andre Drummond's shoes, but you roll out with Willie Cauley-Stein, start playing. Why did we not play Paul Reed until like the last 3 games of the season? This is something that I know everyone's already talked about, but it's inexcusable. Like, after Andre Drummond gets traded, you immediately start playing Paul Reed 10 plus minutes a game, getting him ready for the postseason.
The first couple games.
Well, because he didn't have the option then. Then they signed Cauley-Stein, who
then
only
Paul
played
Millsap
a very tiny bit. But Paul Millsap came, once Paul Millsap got a little ramped up, and we saw that he was unfortunately done. And then they go ahead and they signed DeAndre Jordan, who, I don't know which one was worse, honestly. I don't think it matters, but either way, like you need Paul Reed to be getting those minutes, like for the postseason. That's what the point was. And Paul Reed, I will say, overall, did great in the postseason, considering the the level of experience he had.
Exactly.
But if he had been given even more, because we heard about all this with the he's not in because he commits too many errors, too many mental mistakes. How do you think you get better about that? You need in-game experience, and playing in the G League and dominating, scoring 25 to 30 points. That's not going to get it done. You don't get better at basketball by playing people who are much worse than you. You get better playing people who are better than you.
Exactly.
That's why Paul Reed needs NBA experience. Exactly. That's why he should have been in there for 10 plus minutes every game after Andre Drummond got traded. And that's why he still is a little behind the curve when you talk about what Doc Rivers is looking for in a backup center.
Or backup power forward, right? Like,
I think the shot needs to come along a little bit before that's a real, before a reality.
And I do agree. But my one thing about Paul Reed is I get it's the G League. I really do get it's the G League. But he's a 2-time G League MVP, dominated. I think one year he was Defensive Player of the Year, and one season he was Defensive Player of the Year and MVP. Like,
he's the Wilt Chamberlain of the G League. Like, he's absolutely insane.
So my thing is, like you said, you take those reps, you put him in the NBA, allow him to make his mistakes in the regular season games, where yes, wins matter in the regular season for seeding and blah 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 blah. But like, he needs to make his mistakes early on, so that when you put him in a second round matchup against the number 1 seed, that you're saying to yourself, if you're Doc Rivers at that time, all I'm trying to do is buy 5 minutes a half. Right? Where Embiid, you may say, okay, I'm trying to buy 9 to 10 minutes a half. Like, but he doesn't have the experience. So you have to say 5 minutes. And then as soon as he makes 2 mistakes, all right, you're out of here. We're just going to go small with Niang and Tobias.
Yeah. I mean, well, listen, when you talk about, Paul Reed's foul trouble, which, I mean, he already improved on that in the postseason,
from one series to the other.
Well, but so now here's the problem though, is he went from borderline fouling out in 10 minutes to only getting like 2 fouls a game, but then he just wasn't competing at the same level. You could tell that he was just holding his own game back physically and mentally, and that's the opposite of what you need Paul Reed to do, because Paul Reed, that's all effort, athleticism, instinct. Like, that's where he thrives, and especially also, as a backup 5.
He also realized that he was getting that I'm new to the NBA whistle. So like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that extra hustle play that
Yeah.
PJ Tucker makes, he's not going to get called for over the back, or
No.
he's not going to
Yeah.
get called for the push. But
But
this guy,
with
Paul
time,
Reed,
he'll get that whistle sooner. You know.
but those are my bad. Those are my bad things with Doc. The
Mm.
good things with Doc, I will say, is that the whole Ben Simmons nonsense, he coached through that very well. Also put Joel in a position to really like step up and be the leader, like vocally, and even with
Yeah.
his play, like together as a coaching staff,
Yeah.
they worked really hard to make sure and be specifically without Harden when Harden wasn't here
Hmm.
to allow him to really work and make it easier for him with spacing, like Matisse cutting and stuff like that. Whatever I will give him credit
Yeah.
where credit is due on that. Two, known for not making any adjustments ever. He's made some good adjustments in the Toronto series that I feel
Yeah.
like helped. Everybody talked about Nick Nurse was going to coach a
The
ring
circles
around
around him.
Doc
Yeah.
Rivers,
Hmm.
and it
Yeah.
did not happen. It did not happen. And I feel like he stepped up and he did a lot. He had a lot of adjustments. He created really good mismatches
Hmm.
for a while, specifically game plans where, Embiid wasn't getting the ball. The
Yeah.
action where Maxey and Harden were screening for each other so they could attack Van
Hmm.
Fleet or Gary Trent. Like these are some of the things that Doc made those adjustments were great.
Yeah.
Also, game 6, where they start trapping Siakam
Yeah.
in the second half, change that entire game. Great
Hmm.
adjustment at halftime to come out and say, all right, this guy's getting hot. Let's trap him on the pick and roll, make him get rid of the ball, make some of these other guys who aren't playmakers at all,
Hmm.
because Van Fleet is not on the court. Let's make these
Yeah.
other guys make that short roll or that extra pass or take that floater or whatever. Just make those decisions. Also having Joel guard Scotty Barnes, where we're
Yeah.
taking out the equation. We're gonna let this rookie who is not a good shooter shoot y'all out the game. If that's what he's gonna do, we're gonna take that. So he made some
Yeah.
really good coaching adjustments, I think, as well. And then in the Heat series, playing
At that
DeAndre
point,
Jordan,
I mean, I can't blame him too much for what happened there. You know.
I agree. He did make adjustments with Trap and Tyler Hero in games 3 and 4, but then it disappeared in
Yeah.
5 and 6, whatever. But I feel like the one that's why I'm like, I'm not sure because we talk about the Lakers rumors and whether
Yeah.
Daryl's, playing poker face and whether he's going to be
Hmm.
back. I really can't. It's where there's smoke, there's fire. We always talk about
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
cannot make a determination because they did the mic mic'd up and Doc is in the huddle talking about, come on, guys, fight. We got this fight. And
Yeah.
nobody is saying, and nobody's
Yeah.
saying, like, yeah,
Nobody's even paying
y'all, like,
attention.
let's do.
Yeah.
I'm
I
like, did
know.
he lose the team?
Yeah.
Because that don't
Well,
sound
I
good in
mean,
game 6. That don't sound
I
good.
think it's a little column A, column B. Like, how much of it is it like Doc Rivers not motivating his team? How much of it is like this roster? Just you don't have
But he's supposed
because
to be a player's coach, right?
Joel Embiid's like a fire guy on the court. He's a guy who when he's on, he's gonna rile up the entire team, and that's awesome. James Harden's done a good job, kind of like quietly like mentoring people like Maxey or whatever. You don't have this is what Joel Embiid was talking about. You don't have like that raw, PJ Tucker kind of guy who,
Well,
that
our
Marcus
guy is
Smart kind of
Georges
guy
Niang.
who I, but was he during the playoffs?
No.
Yeah, he was not, so I need a guy who, who's like Niang to me is like he's a spicier version of Ersan Ilyasova. And I love him for that, like that's fantastic. I would love to get a guy though who's like, he's gonna like eyeball you, the other team on the court.
Mhm.
Like he's clapping hands down, down the other end. Like he's in their head, like I don't necessarily need a Draymond Green level player, although that
Right.
would be great, but that's the attitude that I want,
Right.
and so that's when we kind of like to peek back to the trade Danny Green conversation we had before. Like the first player to come to my mind when you talk about perfect situation to do that with is Marcus Morris, where you get a little bit closer salary, right? I mean, maybe you add in like Furkan Korkmaz, maybe they want
Right.
Matisse Thybulle, things like that. But you figure that all out, and that's the deal. You bring in Marcus Morris, who, people say the Morris twins are like a little bit of that fake tough, whatever. I mean, I wouldn't want to piss off Marcus Morris,
When I tell
like
you that, like high school, like
yeah.
like literally, we graduated the same year, and
Mhm.
their high school team played in our same division. They weren't fake tough. They are who they say they are.
Yeah.
They are who they say they are.
So I'm all about it, like if that's the move that they decide they want to go with and bring in a guy like that. But my point is like, there's no like fire guy in the huddle from a player standpoint either,
Yeah.
because we've seen that. Like that's not necessarily Joel Embiid's style of
Nope.
leadership, and I think that's okay. Like, obviously, you want a guy who does everything exactly as you want it. He yells and screams, he's a leader on, off the court, in the huddle, everything like that. That's not realistic. I mean, you look around the league and how many players are really like that. Like Steph Curry's not like that as far as like a,
Nope.
a rah-rah, like, rally the troops. That's what they have Draymond for,
Yep.
like, so you can't, demand Joel be the perfect star. He's fantastic as he is. This is why you need complementary players around him, both in personality and in play.
Correct. And like the whole time, Pat Bev was killing Chris Paul on
Yeah.
ESPN
Oh
for a
yeah.
week
Yeah.
straight. I
Yeah.
just kept saying, like, I wish we had Pat Bev.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
do. I wish we had Pat Bev because he would really get in people's asses.
Yeah.
The city would
Yeah.
love him. Every tech he got, every little
Oh yeah.
extracurricular thing they would like. The city would
Yeah.
love, like Pat Beverly jerseys would sell out. I'm telling
Mhm.
you,
Oh,
they
yeah, I'm
would
sure,
love
I'm
Pat
sure.
Bev.
And listen, you can talk all day or not, like, was he right or wrong? Like, that's not the point. Like, the
Hmm.
the point is he's an instigator,
Yes.
It's like being a goon in hockey, like, there's just a valuable role. Like, for the Flyers, like, I'm gonna switch to hockey for a quick second, like, Zach McEwen, like, listen, the Flyers are terrible, I'm not gonna lie to you, right? But, like, Zach McEwen was one of the more valuable players on the team because he has that attitude,
Hmm.
Like, you look at a guy like Ramas Ristolainen, who was like supposed to be that kind of guy. We're paying him like $5 million to do that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, McEwen's getting like less than $1 million, and he's doing it a hell of a lot better than Ristolainen. Like that's the kind of player that you really want. The
Hmm.
gutsy player, energy. He really just gets on the nerves of the other guys. And so I need that equivalent. I need that Philadelphia equivalent, or
Yeah.
that NBA equivalent, I should say, rather. So all that just to say, like, you can put some of it on Doc, you can't put all of it on Doc. I
Right.
do wonder about them losing him losing the locker room. You heard those rumors earlier this season. I believe they came out of NBC Sports Philadelphia.
Hmm.
So what looks to happen. I've heard people mention like, oh, maybe the Sixers are trying to say we're staying by him, try and build up a little Doc Rivers trade value. Is that something that we could see? So
Right.
I mean, what do you think? Like, is
I,
that a
I
possibility, you
think that's
think?
definitely a possibility because Maury
Yeah.
seems to not try to show his hand or
Yeah.
like so this is what Maury does. He either not show his hand or he'll like force
Yeah.
you to try to show your hand. So like in this situation, he's saying, "Oh yeah, Doc is a coach," which they really could
Yeah.
believe. They want to work with
Sure.
Doc. He making $8 million a year. The ownership could be like, "Listen, let's make this
Yeah.
work." If Doc wants to, be a little more analytical or go
Mhm.
along with a little bit more with
Okay.
the team, like we're
Yeah.
okay to having Doc back. And more that could be all true. And more could be setting it up to where he's saying like,
Sure.
we're here with Doc. The Lakers really want Doc. Okay, if you want
Yeah.
Doc, we need a first round pick for Doc or something like that.
Yeah.
But then my only fear is who becomes the Sixers coach afterwards. And clearly, this is all
Yeah.
being set up for Mike D'Antoni to become the
That's
Sixers
the
coach.
problem.
If this truly does happen, and it's weird
Yeah.
because Mike D'Antoni was a front runner before Doc got
Mhm.
the job before because
Yeah.
apparently the Sixers didn't want to pay Ty Lue whatever he wanted, which was 10 mil or whatever
Yeah.
Ty Lue wanted a year. So
Mhm.
D'Antoni wasn't coming to be a coach, but it's like, is this turning into the Philadelphia Rockets? Like, I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's the problem. And then you hear, Joel Embiid talking about getting guys like PJ Tucker, which don't like I would love PJ Tucker, but it's like I'm not trying to get Daniel House and Ben McLemore, and like get all the though Ben McLemore had a half decent season. But I'm not trying to be the Philadelphia Rockets. And I don't love D'Antoni at all as a coach.
right.
There's that story that was going around. I don't know how true exactly it was, but it sounded realistic as hell. About James Harden like playing defense when he first got to Houston. And he gets like sat down by D'Antoni, and D'Antoni's like, no, we don't do that here. Like I mean, like How are you going to build a team around Joel Embiid and you just don't give a crap about defense? Like
I
that just
mean,
doesn't
it's
that
gonna be
doesn't
all
work.
Joel. It's gonna be all on Joel. No perimeter
And
defense.
that doesn't work. That's what breaks him down. That's what gets him hurt by the end of the year. You know, you need to have a serviceable backup center who can relieve some of the stress off him. You need to
Correct.
have decent perimeter. What they need to do is they need to work on being able to kind of like what the Utah Jazz do. And this is why, like, I would love Quinn Snyder if he shook loose from Utah, right? But what you need to do is just funnel people into Joel Embiid, right? And let him be, you know, his own stifle tower effectively, right? Where you don't have to worry about him switching on the perimeter as much, which he can do, mind you. He can do it. It's not that he can't. It's just a matter of should he have to, you
Right.
know. But you keep him on the paint there, low block. You have the perimeter defenders outside who are capable. You have guys who are longer, more athletic, get a little more height there. Like these are things that Philadelphia just desperately needs in
Yep.
general. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. I'm not looking to move even further away. And this is part of the problem too. If you get Mike D'Antoni, like everything's pointing towards small offensive basketball. And it's like, I get that's kind of how the future's going, but this is the Sixers have refused to evolve for decades. And now they're going too far the other way if this is what happens, because obviously they're pursuing Bradley Beal this offseason. Everybody knows it. You can say whatever you want. They're going after Bradley Beal. So you
Absolutely.
get Bradley Beal. You don't have to do the sign and trade necessarily. This is assuming you're able to clear off. I'm speedboating right through this just because I don't want to talk about this long.
Yeah.
But you know, Bradley Beal, you're able to clear off the cap space so you can sign him, whatever. So you add him. You don't have to trade Maxey. You have Maxey, Beal, and Harden. Harden becomes your de facto small forward defensively just because you're screwed any other way.
Yep.
Like, I'm not looking to run and gun with a lineup like that. And who knows who your power forward is at that point? Because like, what's it gonna do? Would you trade Matisse Thybulle for like a Javante Green who like? And I love like, yeah. I mean, honestly, I'd take Aaron Gordon in that scenario because at least you have some kind of size. But I'm worried it's going to be like a Javante Green type, a Josh Okogie type. Like I'm talking like 6'6" and less. These guys are like both those guys I mentioned. They're about 6'4". Like that's the kind of power forward that I see. Do they bring back Robert Covington? That's right in line with, you know, the Rockets history. So like you need, and Robert Covington is by far the best out of all those names I mentioned as far as the athletic profile that you want. But it's like you can't have Joel Embiid and then four guys in the starting lineup who are not only like sub 6'8", but then three who are 6'5" or less. Like it's too and unathletic at that. Like Bradley Beal coming off the wrist injury, you know, he should still have some of his athleticism, but it's Harden, I guess, who's really the biggest problem there. But all this just to say, like, listen, D'Antoni, he's not the answer. You know, if Quinn Snyder shakes loose, that's exciting. Sam Cassell, that'd be exciting. Dan Burke, would love Dan Burke. When he took over for Doc Rivers early in the season, he looked fantastic. You know, I know it's a very small sample size, but to have a defensive coach around Joel Embiid, that's a dream. That's a dream.
We'll see. Ultimately, I don't think Doc is going anywhere because I think it'll just be too many pieces to the puzzle or too many things that have to move or work out perfectly in order for this to happen. But I do believe, like we said, even with the Bradley Beal stuff, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like there aren't people just making stuff up. Like these are things that are being said, and if it may not come out directly out of Doc's mouth or whoever, but somebody close to Doc or whatever, like these things are being said, and this is why it's floating out there. Like it's not happening for no reason. So if we wake up tomorrow and we see that he's traded or he's being fired or whatever, or parting ways, whatever the case may be, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think he'll still be here. But Doc has to change with the times, man. He has to start adjusting more, and he has to start playing young guys. And we look at his history. He's played Rondo, he's played SGA, he played Kendrick Perkins, but he doesn't have a history of playing the young guys. And he played Maxey because
talk about one of these things is not like the other. You're right. He's gotta evolve. He's got to get with the times. Something that's never really been his strong suit.
Right.
It's Doc Rivers needs to change, is what it is. And can he? Will he? Who knows? Real quick before we move on from Doc, I just want to talk. Just because, you know, a trade is a possibility because you never know.
Mhm.
Last time head coach was traded in the NBA, it was, oh, look at that, Doc Rivers, traded from the Celtics to LA, the Clippers. So obviously there's precedent, not only for a head coach being traded, but for Doc Rivers being traded. And not only that, but specifically for an NBA head coach named Doc Rivers being traded to LA. This has happened before. This can happen again.
Yep.
What they got last time, it was an unprotected 2015 first round pick. Ended up being, I know it was RJ Hunter. I forget what number the pick was, but it was RJ Hunter. So they effectively traded Doc for nothing, which is potentially fine too. You mentioned a first round pick. Don't know if the Lakers are in a position where they're willing to trade a first round pick for Doc Rivers. I think that's potentially the hang up. And Daryl Morey is not the kind of guy to not get value for something valuable. So if somebody wants something, that gives it value. If the Lakers want Doc, he has value. They have to give up value to get value. Right. So either we're talking multiple second round picks, I think. I wonder, and this is the thing, like there's so few like NBA head coach trades. Like I really got to find out. I got to find somebody who knows this. Can they be traded in combination with players?
Probably.
I have no idea. Like I have flat out no idea. So my thought becomes, well, if they're not willing to give up a first, what value can they bring Philadelphia that works out? And the thought that enters my mind is, well, there's already been talks about LA possibly moving on from Russell Westbrook. They don't want to necessarily just attach a first round pick. They don't want to just salary dump Westbrook and give up a first round pick. They want some more value than that. So this is the most complicated, fake, asinine trade. There's no way this happens, but I'm just throwing it out there because it's interesting. If you could get a 3-team trade that involves coaches, picks, and players, right? I know this is the most insane. I never thought I'd even be able to talk about this, but it involves Doc Rivers and Tobias Harris going to LA, right?
That's
Russell Westbrook, right? Now, hear me out. Russell Westbrook, and you can throw Korkmaz in there too for salary matching, whatever. Russell Westbrook goes to wherever,
wherever.
it's tough for, I think the team with the most cap space is Detroit, at like 29 million or something like that. So, and that they
Spurs
can,
have some cash too. Spurs,
they're number two. Number two. So I don't think that Pop's gonna pull for Westbrook, but if Detroit gets picks out of this, I think they go for it. So in any case, you have Westbrook go to Detroit, whatever. They get the first round pick from the Lakers. At that point, Lakers get Doc Rivers and Tobias Harris for a first round pick in Russell Westbrook. They got to feel a lot better about that. And long story short, the Sixers free up cap space. Something like that. I'm just saying, Daryl Morey, just if it's possible, make a phone call. See if that works. We're just throwing things to the wall, seeing what sticks. Just like pasta.
I knew
you
Tobias
take it out just to see if it's ready.
I know Tobias was going to be attached to Doc Rivers. I do that.
But Tobias plays well under Doc Rivers.
He does.
So it's that's probably fine. And Tobias, listen, obviously Tobias, rightfully so, gets annoyed at all the trade talk and everything like that. And I think part of it, I would imagine how I would feel if I were in that situation. Part of it is he's being talked about as a salary dump to all these crappy teams and all that, like throwing him to the Thunder, things like that. Teams trying to lose. Well, you send him to the Lakers and he's in between LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That's not the worst situation in the world if you're Tobias Harris.
It's not. It might be better than the Philly situation.
That could really work out best for all parties. Again, if it's even possible. I mean, we're talking about fairy tale stuff here. This is Lord of the Rings is more realistic than this that we're talking about right now. Right? But we mention it anyway because there's always a chance.
Yes.
Right? So we're gonna move on. We're done talking about Doc Rivers. We're done talking about the Lakers. Finish with them. We are going to keep talking about trades because there's one other important bit of potential trade news that came out. So the NBA draft combine was last week, right? One bit of not even news, but just a hint of a rumor that came out is that the Chicago Bulls are potentially interested in Matisse Thybulle, right? So this comes back to Mark Eversley, who now has a front office role with the Bulls.
Yep.
Mark Eversley was a former vice president of Sixers player staff. Obviously with the Sixers.
Mhm.
I think that ended by like 2020, something like that. He
Yeah,
left for
2020.
Chicago.
Yeah,
Um,
the pandemic
apparently,
season.
yeah. So he apparently was instrumental in the acquisition of Matisse Thybulle,
Yeah.
and was a big fan of him. So anyway, he smells the blood that Matisse Thybulle may have fallen out of favor in Philadelphia, especially as he's coming into a contract year. Is Chicago potentially interested? Possibly. I mean, all the smoke matches up. Like it's all logical steps.
Yeah.
As to, is this something that Chicago's looking to do? They need to improve their defense even more. They could use some help in the forward department. On the wing, yes, but they have Caruso who helps. This is mostly like thinking Thibault as like a 3 small ball 4, which they've
Yeah.
done small ball 4 stuff before.
Mhm.
Patrick Williams is even a little bit undersized. DeMar DeRozan's played the 4 for him. Uh, what do you think about Thibault to the Bulls? Who are you targeting from
I
Chicago?
mean, one, I think it's very possible. I do think that. So the one thing I would like to say about Matisse, and Matisse is a great guy, from what I
Yeah,
know.
the best.
But but then like who's falling out of favor the quickest in this city besides him? One, because of the vaccine
Yeah,
stuff, and who cares? I don't even want to
yeah,
get into that.
yeah.
Whatever.
That's
But
not even
like,
the point.
but it's the development, like
Yeah,
his development, like he's regressed. Like when he was a rookie, he was an average 3 point, like he was a league average 3 point shooter. Like
yeah,
it was okay for him to play with Ben Simmons on the court because at least, although it wasn't at a high attempt, he was making like
hmm
35% of his threes. You know,
yeah,
maybe I think it was at one point earlier in the season, he was making like 37% of his threes his rookie year. So here we are now. It's like he's regressed. And
yeah,
to me, it's like, Matisse, you have to see what these other guys who were labeled defensive specialists or knew that they couldn't be on the floor necessarily, like they just improve their game every season. Like, I hate
yeah,
to bring up Mikal Bridges, but he's improved his game every season. He started out as a defensive guy, then 3-and-D, then he added the little floater to his game. Now he has a little pull up and has a little bit, like he just added things to his game so that he can be a better player. And we haven't seen that with Matisse. Like he can't make layups, or like he always misses layups. Like 3-pointer, like you never think is going in ever. When it goes in, you're
yeah,
like, oh, cool, but you never think it's
yeah,
going in.
yeah,
So it's just like it's one of those things where you're a little bit disappointed in Matisse, and his development and what he needs to work on. Hopefully he'll take that serious going forward this offseason, regardless if he's a Sixer or not. But
yeah.
if I'm looking to trade him and they are interested, there are a couple names that pop out to me that you're looking for Matisse. So I feel like first, we've had issues with one, volume 3-point shooting, and
Yep.
two, backup point guards. I feel like Kobe
hmm
White could be a, a target
Yeah.
in a Matisse Thybulle trade. I really
And
feel like
Chicago's like clearly not overly like enthused about signing him to a long-term deal. Like
right,
it
right,
seems kind of like not a bust for bust, because I don't think either of them are necessarily busts.
right.
Kobe White's a little closer to that territory, but just underdeveloping young players,
Hmm.
just to swap, hopefully a change of scenery.
Right. And then the other target, although this probably won't happen, but somehow they can make it work for Alex Caruso.
Oh,
He
sure.
could be an amazing addition to the Sixers.
Yeah.
Defense, ball handling, athleticism,
hmm
leadership. Like, I can't believe the Lakers didn't resign him.
Yeah.
Like, and for the number that he was asking for, like, it's not like he got paid tons of money.
Yeah.
So if they could make and then for Alex Caruso's number, you would probably have to add Furkan or Shake or somebody else, a
Yeah.
combination of a couple of guys to make it
One
work.
of the
But
two.
those would
Yeah.
probably be the two targets that I'm
Well, you
specifically
you
looking
might even
for.
have to from a value perspective too.
Yeah.
Just because Caruso's nasty defensively, but then he
Hmm.
also has like a monochrome of an offensive game. So,
Yeah. So those would be the two.
that's I agree. Like those are the two at the top of my list.
Hmm.
Um, you know, if I'm Philadelphia looking for a deal with Chicago, that's
Right.
assuming it's a 2-team deal. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. Whatever the case may be. Um, what other name that I'd be interested in throwing out there too? I'd mentioned him earlier, and it was kind of as a slight. But Javonte Green, I think, is definitely someone who'd be of value to Philadelphia, just under the right circumstances. So I think that, and Sixers fans now love to crap on Thybulle. And Thybulle hasn't developed offensively. I get it. Thybulle, he was just named to the second team all defense.
Right.
Like, this dude can play. This
Right.
dude has value. So do I think like a Javonte Green, Matisse Thybulle straight up deal makes sense? Like,
No.
no, absolutely not. So then that's when we start talking about draft picks, right? If you can get like a heavily protected future first from Chicago,
With Javonte.
pull the trigger on for that, and Javonte Green from Matisse Thybulle, pull the trigger on it. Like, I don't care if it's top 20, like top 20 or less, as long as it has like a solid future plan. Because like the OKC pick, that was the last top 20 protected pick the Sixers had.
Right.
That was the one that ended up being Tyrese Maxey.
Right.
If that pick did not convey, the Sixers were going to get 2 second-round picks.
Right.
That's the thing that's like not talked about often enough with the Mike Muscala shot. Is like, not only did he bring us Tyrese Maxey, but we almost had nothing.
Exactly.
So if we can get one where it's like it's depreciating protection, something like that, like
would you do it
for
would you do it Matisse straight up for this year's Chicago's first round pick if they offered it?
Hell yeah, for 18, yeah, absolutely, no doubt in my mind. Because you take 18, Harrison Grimm was the first one to mention this idea, so I want to give him credit. You take 18, you take 23 from Philadelphia, because Brooklyn is most likely going to defer
to next year,
and they're
right?
going to take
this is what I'm reading
the 2023. So you have 18 and you have 23 from Philadelphia. You target like a late lottery slot, right? And so the name that I go to, like, immediately when I think about that, and this is again while I'm giving credit to Harrison, because this is the player that he mentioned as well. But you want to go Tari Easton out of LSU, right? Because people are comparing him to OG Anunoby, just like fantastic. So if you want to say, I don't know, I'm looking at who is picking in that area, and you have Charlotte already has 2 picks. Probably count them out. I don't think they're going to want to have 3 first-round picks this year.
Right.
Cleveland possibly.
Right.
They potentially make sense because they have a higher payroll. What with Kevin Love, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, everything like that.
And they're going to have to pay Colin Sexton.
They're going to have to pay Colin Sexton. They're trying to bring Ricky Rubio back. Darius Garland is already taking less in order to try and finesse those deals.
Yeah.
Or at least he's verbally said he's going to take less. So I think there's also Oklahoma City, whoever knows what they could do. So you package those picks, you move up to 14 to 12, you go after Tari Eason. 100%, I'm all completely for it. So yes, in short, I would definitely do Matisse straight up for 18. I just don't know that Chicago is going to do it. That's my only concern. Now, do they really love Matisse? Maybe. So maybe they're willing to do it. Maybe they're willing to do 18 and I mean, maybe you could swap 18 and 23 for so essentially it's 18 and Kobe White for Thybulle and 23. Maybe that's something they want to work with.
Right.
That's fine too. But yeah, if I could get 18 in any case, I'm absolutely interested, because even if I can't get Tari Eason, like if I can move up to 18, that puts you in like Kendall Brown territory. Who's another forward who I think the Sixers should absolutely be interested in, and I'm a little worried he won't be there at 23. So all for it. So and what's interesting with this is that this is the first Matisse Thybulle rumor. Like, this is not like more is going to come.
Yeah.
Like there's been nothing official, but there's been whispers of the Denver Nuggets being potentially interested in him, and in which case that's another like potential Danny Green, like Thybulle and Danny Green for Will Barton kind of a situation,
Right.
and probably a little bit of draft compensation from Philadelphia, I'd imagine, as well. But like there's option or I forget where I said it, so forgive me if whomever wrote it sees this, but Matisse Thybulle for Jermichael Green, that's who it was. Which is another thing that I'd consider. Maybe I'd want a little more value from Denver, but I love Jermichael Green personally.
Yeah,
I think he's got a fire about him too. Yeah, exactly. So I'd be pretty happy with that. All things considered.
My one thing, and I would like to say, because we talk about little dog and tough guys and stuff like that. My only hope is that the Sixers don't just go overboard on like just players with the dog in them. Like I just hope it's not
Yeah, yeah,
Joel
like
Mix,
they
but
go with that, and yeah, exactly. Like he's just got a posse around him now. Like you want like people who
like
can play too.
exactly. I
Like
just hope they don't do that.
yeah.
That's
Well,
my
like we
only
want
thing.
Marcus Morris. We don't want Markeith Morris. Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that we're looking for.
Yeah, just like
So
that. That's the only
I hear you
thing that
loud
I
and
hope.
clear.
That's the
Yeah,
only thing. But nah, I agree. And the one thing is, and like you said, more rumors are coming. Matisse, like until now,
yeah.
Matisse has really been untouchable. Like
Yeah,
literally.
yeah. Well, we talked about the Harden trade. Like when everyone was talking about the Harden trade, it was I don't want to include Matisse Thybulle. That's what the hangup was
Yep.
on the deal initially,
Yep.
and then they ended up taking Andre Drummond instead and Seth Curry, and it's like okay, and not that either of those two players are perfect either. They're not exactly the ideal postseason players, but like we've gone from him being untouchable to the Philadelphia fan base saying just get rid of him. Um, the truth is always somewhere in between, and I think that's the case as far as Matisse Thybulle's value around the league. So I think he will get traded. Um, I don't hope it. I'm a big Thybulle supporter. He is a cool guy.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy. He's the nicest guy. I wish him well in his career. It just doesn't seem like it's long for Philadelphia much longer.
Well, it'll be real awkward when they have to pin over that mural in Fishtown.
Yeah, yeah. Well, stuff happens. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Well, anyway, that's all that we have for today, and
Yep.
I do want to say the Thibault it does bring us to a topic we're going to talk about on a future episode, possibly our next one. We're going to look at some stay and go
Hmm.
for the Philadelphia 76ers. So there's quite a few big names when you look at guys like James Harden,
Yep.
when you look at possible trade targets or trade block, I should say, members like Tobias Harris. So we'll talk about all that in the future and a lot more. And of course, keep you
Can't
guys
wait.
up to date on the latest going on with the Philadelphia 76ers. So, Justin, I just want to say again, man, so happy to have you back.
I'm happy to be back, man.
Awesome.
I'm
Awesome.
happy to be back.
Well, we look forward to being able to give you guys more news around the Philadelphia 76ers. But for right now, it's been Justin and I, and we just hit you with the baseline scoop.